Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome along. Hello, Duncan.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
It's an absolutely huge pleasure to have you on. For anyone in the audience already who, by some bizarre coincidence, doesn't know who Duncan Rhodes is, we are privileged to have a bit of time with Duncan today. He was essentially the first really public-facing famous face of Games Workshop in his time there, and the Warhammer TV team with the painting tutorial videos that really kicked off Warhammer's kind of online content strategy and connecting with Warhammer fans for painting. Hundreds, thousands of young hobbyists like myself in that time picked up on or re-picked up on the miniature painting hobby through that content. Since leaving Games Workshop a few years ago, Duncan has completely struck out on his own, created a new business called Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy, which teaches people all sorts of techniques and skills of how to do miniature painting in different ways, not necessarily the right way all the time, but there's every different way to do different techniques based on decades and decades of experience doing it with all different types of miniatures and so on. And as well as that, he's launched in collaboration with various colleagues their own paint range, the Tooth and Coats paint range. And now creating all kinds of videos for YouTube on how to paint everything and everything under the sun, which of course at Wargamer is something we're super interested in. So we're so happy to have you with us, Duncan. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you. Well, you've been very kind, a bit too kind, I must say, with that intro. I feel duty bound to say that I was largely in the right place at the right time, and whilst made the best of opportunities and taken some risks, really it's the people around me who have helped bring all this together. So with the painting videos and with the academy, whilst I'm the most public-facing part of it, I'm by no means the full show, so to speak. So I actually left Games Workshop with a guy called Roger, who was the chap I worked with at Games Workshop and set up the TV studio in the first place. And he had the idea of doing these tutorial videos and got me in as his presenter, which I more or less managed to get because I didn't chew my fingernails, whereas everyone else in our department did. But I took to it well because I really enjoyed the teaching, like teaching skills and trying to make the hobby more accessible is what I always did in my retail days. And we hit it off and we left together to set up the academy. And my dog Spot's just joined me. Hello. It's gone really well. So like I say, I can't claim to be the full brains behind the outfit. Really, it's having all the people around us that's made all this successful. So yeah, and it's just got more than that with people joining us, including some people that we used to work with at Workshop too. So it's been really good, really fun.
Amazing. Well, ordinarily with these, I will kick us off with a couple of questions, and then as things move on, we'll start picking up questions from the chat. We sort of verged into what I was going to ask first, without me needing to ask anything, which is kind of just a little bit about your story. So we'll verge into the specifics on what DRPA and what Tooth and Coat's doing in a bit, and the roles of those other people that come on the journey with you. But I think people will be interested in your story. You kind of accidentally became in our industry what counts as pretty famous by just being nice and doing painting tutorials online. You spawned what turned out to be a strangely large meme with the Tooth and Coats thing.
All quite unexpected.
Which is quite funny, given that it's just describing the consistency of paint. But yes. And like I mentioned earlier, it would have been many people's first kind of friendly introduction to miniature painting as a hobby and as a skill. What was that journey like for you? I get the feeling that most of it was quite unexpected and odd. But take us through it.
So I suppose the best way I can describe it is it's sort of been like holding on for dear life, I guess, in some ways. So when all this started, YouTube was still very young, and there wasn't really, there were a few people doing painting tutorial things, but it was like a very sort of like wild time. You know, there wasn't like a set format, or people hadn't really found the direction of trying to do things quickly or anything like that. I was very nervous about signing on to it because I'm quite an introverted person, and I used to be terrified of public speaking and things like that. But I did really enjoy teaching people the painting things and helping unlock the hobby for them. You know, I got a real kick out of doing that. And I was working out workshop in the studio doing that sort of thing for White Dwarf and Codex books and things. And when the paint range got refreshed, the idea of this DVD popped up to go with the How to Paint Citadel Ninjas book. Like I say, basically, because I don't chew my fingernails or anything, my hands looked the prettiest. So I went in to do that. So I got seconded to the TV department for, I think it was like 3 weeks or something, and that's where I met Roger. Roger had further ideas of how we could do more personal style painting tutorial content. So for the DVD, it was my hands, but it was a different voice talking about what I was doing. He wanted to combine it all together and show the person, so you had a personality to connect to and to learn from. And he managed to convince his boss and my boss to have me join him for 2 days to film a concept video. And his boss really liked it, even though it was phenomenally boring. It's basically how to build a Riptide battlesuit from start to finish. It's like 2 hours long and it's so dull. But the concept is proven with that, and so then the job went up. That was quite unexpected for me. Roger came down and he was like, dude, we could do something really cool here. You should try it, man. I think about it and stuff. And I was like, oh God, I'm really comfortable doing what I'm doing. And I was surrounded by people at the time who didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And the whole idea of doing TV Warhammer stuff is ludicrous. So I remember I used to carpool with some friends who all worked at Workshop, and on the drive home I told them that this had happened, and they all said to me, if you don't do that and somebody else does and it turns out to be a great success, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And they were right, you know, that was the convincing argument, so I went for it. And I got the job, and apparently I nearly didn't. You know, there was lots of people applying for it, but yeah, it just more or less took off. And it coincided with a time when Games Workshop was stopping putting anyone's names on anything, not crediting anybody for codexes and things. But Roger argued that you couldn't just show my face and not put a name to it, because people would assign someone else to it and it'd get weird. So for a number of years, I was the only name being put out by Games Workshop, and it was as YouTube was taking off. So all these things coincided and just sort of pushed me forward on it. Yeah, it's all been completely unexpected. So 12-year-old me would have been terrified of this. But I felt very lucky and very blessed with all the people who have been around me during this journey. And I've just been trying to make the most of it, and try and do it honorably, you know, and try and be honest about what you do with the models, and show what the techniques are, with a goal to try and to get people to get those results. And when you do see someone follow a guide for a bigger model that we've done, like something like Magnus the Red back in the day, and they get a result that looks just like ours, it's such a great feeling that you've helped them achieve that. So that's kind of been the driving thing that's just kept me doing this. I really like helping people in that way. And then all the memes and the Academy naming and all that has just been an unexpected side effect of it. So like the Academy being called Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy, that was Roger's idea. I wasn't really comfortable with it. We had another name in mind, but he had evidence that people searched for my name and then the model they wanted to paint. And so he said, we've got to maximize our chances of people finding us after we leave Workshop. That's the thing to do, and I think he's right, even though it's surreal for me to say the website address is duncanrhodes.com. Yeah. But, you know, here we are.
Yeah, Keith, it's strange to imagine somebody else insisting that you make a website that's got your name in it when you don't want to. That's an interesting one.
Well, Roger and I we've known each other for a long time. Because the Games Workshop, the recording studio, for a number of years, it was just me and him in this soundproof studio with all the walls black and everything, you know. So we got to know each other well, as we all faced various challenges in our lives, and we ended up supporting each other through these difficult times and things. And so we actually became very good friends. So we totally trust the others' input and things. And, you know, we'll when it comes to the Academy, we're joint owners of it, right? So we both, there's not one of us in charge, we're kind of both in charge. Now, whilst Roger basically does all the day-to-day and everything, when it comes to important choices, we'll discuss things and we can debate them, and we don't argue, but we say quite bluntly what we think, and we find a good solution. So there's never any sort of we never have any conflict because of this history that we share, and I think that works out really well. So when it comes to the naming of the academy and everything, I know what Roger's reasons are for it, and he knows that I'm not going to jump at it because I want my name in lights or anything like that. We both understand it's a part of this business that's going to be paying everyone's wages, basically, and providing assistance to people and quality products and all this stuff. So yeah,
well, as a
quite a lucky route to be in this position, really.
As a member of the community that is your target audience, I see the logic there completely. We're starting to get a couple of questions in, so I'll move from my list of questions to the interesting one that people are sending. T10G says, "What's the weirdest painting technique you liked or would like to try?" Which implies the question: is there a painting technique you haven't tried?
Oh, there's definitely going to be techniques I haven't tried. I'm sure there's loads I'm not even aware of that I've not tried. The weirdest. So, strange ones I've tried are things like putting paint on and then wiping it off with your finger. Like smudging it and things. Peachy's certainly much more comfortable with that sort of quite wild way of doing things than I am. So I find it really weird, especially when I'm with paint on my fingers and I'm scared of touching the model in the wrong way and getting paint on it. That's something I find a little bid strange. I tend to, if I'm doing something like that, I'll tend to use tissue or something like that to do it. So yeah, there's also I'm really interested in the effects of how enamels can be used and the sort of stuff you can do with them, the clever things of those, and scale modelling, the hyper-realistic scale modelling. There's some effects in that I think look extraordinary, but you need to... it's a lot of knowledge to acquire to be able to get the sort of results you want, and it's always, for me, I've got a lot of stuff to do for the academy and the kind of things that we do normally, and I'd like to experience some of that, but it's tricky finding the time sometimes. It's often easier to go back to the Warhammer figure instead, so... but who knows? I think it'd be a fascinating experience to try doing a video where we just paint a thing like, I don't know, an old car and try and make it as rusted up as possible, make it look as real as possible. And we did that with a Fallout video fairly early on with the Academy, actually. We had the Corvega sedan, and we made like really realistic rust on that. It'd be interesting to try and take that further with a diorama base, with like long overgrown grass and stuff. But yeah, hope that answers that question.
Absolutely. I'll chuck in one from me, which is about contrast, but more broadly, weird new products that like the paint market and specifically stuff for special effects for miniatures exploded in the last 10-15 years since you were doing that work in the first place. Contrast paints, GW's contrast paints came out towards the end of your time at Games Workshop. It's quite easy to see that as kind of a jumping off point. Lots of things have happened since then that were sort of more bottles you can have on your desk that do different things. What do you think of contrast paints and their sort of the ranges of other companies that have come along since to do similar sorts of things? In general, what do you think of them? Do you like using them? How do you like using them, etc.? And how do you think they've changed the game as much as the marketing initially wanted to imply that they would?
Well, I mean, my understanding of the contrast paints is perhaps a little bit skewed versus what people think of them as, because whilst I wasn't directly involved in the development of them a lot, and they were explained to me that they were intended to be a combination of a base coat and a wash in one, so as to speed up your painting, but you'd put them on and then you'd layer on top of them. And so if you consider painting a Space Marine, for example, like an Ultramarine, for example, you'd paint it with the Ultramarines blue, but then you'd layer it with Macragge blue over the top, and the Ultramarines blue would provide you that initial boost of blue and the shading for it. So that would take away the patchiness and things of it. I know the marketing angle was that it was a silver bullet, that you just paint it with that and that's all you need. And that I did find, well, yeah, you can do that, but and that's fine. I just think we should show that you can use it as a piece in the puzzle to get these these cool results here. And I think people have come around to viewing it that way a little bit more. But for me, that was like the default. So I sort of struggle with the idea of having a contrast method. I think that's like a bit. Well, it is, you can put it on and you can get cool effects and stuff like that, but it requires a certain degree of motor function to be able to get the paint neat, and it's very easy to mess it up. So for a beginner, it's putting like one contrast paint on and then putting some regular paints on after that. That's easier than just painting the whole thing with contrast paints. So so I have a bit of a relationship with it in that way. But you can see it's definitely been successful because loads of companies have done their own versions of it. So you can see it's something that will continue, and it's good that you get other companies doing it, because then they're all essentially competing with each other, and that should push the quality a bit higher. And you don't want to end up with one that's like rubs off easily or something like that. You want to make sure they're all as good as possible, and competition's a good thing for that. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes in the next 5 years and what new innovations come along.
We've written a few pieces recently about paint pens, especially getting to be big. Just in the last year or so, a number of the brands in that space have just got more popular. They are a lot of fun to use, and whenever I use them, I think Duncan would not be proud of this gigantic
don't say that.
tip soaked with pre-thinned acrylic paint.
No, I don't.
How do you feel about paint pens?
I don't disapprove. People can paint the miniatures however they like, right? They're miniatures. You don't need my approval on anything. I just hope people enjoy painting stuff. I mean, the way I paint things isn't the way to paint things. It's more or less based upon the training I had at Games Workshop about how to use their products. And over the time, these things, you hone them and sort of adapt them in your own way. In a painting video, I find it most interesting when I get to do something that's different from that, and it'll be some sort of like quirky effect or something a little bit strange, or using a paint in a way that's not really, that's what it wasn't intended for. So just the one that comes to mind off the top of my head, because I mentioned him earlier, Magnus the Red. We used Nihilakh Oxide for shading on his white fabric, and Nihilakh Oxide's designed for a verdigris effect. So I like doing stuff like that, like trying different experiments and seeing what happens.
There's sort of linked into a question that I was going to pick up a minute ago from Mousehammer. A lot of your YouTube content is in the Games Workshop ecosystem. If creating content and the stuff to do with that wasn't so much of a concern, is there a specific model or range you would love to spend more time with?
That's a very good question, that is. So I would probably end up painting some historicals, which Roger would make fun of me for. I do like my Napoleonic stuff, I like all the fancy uniforms of that kind of thing, so I'd probably paint more of that. But I think I've discovered over the last maybe 2-3 years that something I really love is actually older Warhammer miniatures, like ones from when I was a kid. So I'd really like to have a go at doing more of those things. I think that'd be really fun. But it's still quite a niche audience who are into that sort of thing. I think people would watch that as a novelty. But doing stuff like painting the old Nagash model, for example, that'd just be really fun. How can we make that look? And I find for my own hobby, I like getting old miniatures and going through the enjoyment of trying to find them off eBay or car boot sales or something like that, and then paint them with modern techniques and styles and modern colours. It's quite an interesting sort of contrast you get with that. So I think you'd see a lot more of that. Oh, and also I'd enjoy. So I really like that there's a lot of small businesses out in the industry, and they all have really interesting things. So it'd be cool to be able to showcase a bit more of that. So there's a company called Crocodile Games, for example, that does a sort of pseudo Warhammer game, but it's called War Gods, and it's more like ancient Egypt and ancient Greece with all like fantasy creatures in it. Like that's really cool. There's another game called studio called Crooked Dice who do like a TV style game. So they've got figures that look sort of like James Bond and things, and that'd be really cool to do stuff on that too. So I think that'd be interesting. But it is true that Warhammer is the dominant thing, and most of the requests we get are for Warhammer. So you gotta give the people what they want.
Yeah, obviously it's a challenge we face as well, or a question we face as well, is that our industry is exploding with new diversity of different games and different styles of miniatures and different products to paint them with, and as nerds, me and my team want to do all of them all the time. Like every time we get a new, review copy of something tiny that no one's heard of.
Yeah,
we want to spend the day on that, but it's got to weigh against, the news in Warhammer land. So it's always about that balance. Titenji asks, who are your painting or artistic inspirations? Interesting that we go artistic as well as just painting, referring to miniature painting.
Well, when it comes to like really beautiful painted miniatures, I love seeing stuff that Angel Giraldez does. He paints some incredible miniatures, and he's just a really lovely person as well. It's always nice when you end up meeting some of these people and find out they're actually just really nice people. So his stuff I find quite mind-boggling when you see the quality standard of it. But for me, my kind of hobby is it's gaming stuff, painting armies, it's making terrain, it's that sort of thing. So I was lucky enough to work alongside Dave Andrews at Games Workshop for a while. And he and Ali Morrison are good friends, and they do games together. And I've been invited over once or twice to play games with them. And they make up their own games and their own, like they'll sculpt their own miniatures, but they also buy other miniatures and things like that. And they have this just such a nice, relaxed way of doing things where it's all about the spectacle of the table and the game and making all that bespoke stuff. There was one time Dave invited us in the hobby team when I was working there over to his place, and he did a Vietnam game. And it was half role-play game, half war game. And we were playing as squads of Americans. And he had this enormous table set up with all the scenery that he'd made for everything. Like, he'd done villagers, he'd done ships, he'd done forests, all this stuff. And to make the atmosphere, he had like helicopter radio chatter on his computer playing when we came in. So the whole thing was like to get you into the role-play game element. And the game we played, he designed himself. So like that level of commitment to it, I just find really inspirational. So yeah.
I mean, that breadth of elements of the experience that he's put together for his friends is seems like an artistic edifice to me. Yeah. Keep the questions coming in, folks. We've got something from Batsy, and this sounds like this one's the sort of thing that maybe you can't answer, but is it true, Duncan, that you helped to design the new Marneus Calgar model?
No, I had nothing to do with it. I was just a painting guy, that's all I did. I got given it at some point. Yeah, I painted Calgar, I think. Peach did a bad, and I've done so many miniatures, I tend to forget them. The Academy's got over 400, and then there's all the ones we did at Workshop too, and all the tip of the day, so I forget stuff I've done. But no, I wasn't involved in any of the sculpting stuff. There was a time I could go into the sculpting department and chat to the sculptor about the model that we were about to do, try and find out key features they wanted to show so we could put that in the video. But they gradually started tightening security, so I wasn't allowed in after a while. So, yeah.
Explains why we don't get any interviews about things like that, because even Duncan Rhodes within Games Workshop couldn't speak to the sculptors about how to sculpt those things. It offends nobody and nobody's historical legal requirements to Games Workshop to say that Games Workshop is an unusual company. Yes. in how it operates and how its different teams interact with one another or don't. It's a strange place. Spoken to many people who worked there, and they all say the same thing. Speaking of people who've worked there, one of the questions that we've got is, will Duncan do Peachy and Louise Sugden's podcast? So you can answer that question, but also I'd like to talk about your relationship with them and what do you think about all the projects they're doing as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you mean Jugs? Is that the podcast you're talking about?
Yes, I assume so. It's not in the question, but that is their podcast.
So Jugs is an entertaining show, but it's very adult orientated, and we're very family friendly with the Academy. So I can't really go on a show when there's going to be lots of swearing and sex jokes and things like that. So
fair enough. That was something I meant to mention in the intro, actually, but it's not something that comes up as an issue in our community very often. So I thought I wouldn't, but that's an important part of what you guys do.
From what I know, the show's doing really well. They're frequently putting it up, and people really enjoy it. So you don't need me popping on there to be able to enjoy it.
Superb. You've got some more questions coming in as I speak, but we'll hop over to something that I'd thought I might ask about, which is what is maybe one, maybe two, whatever comes to mind. But what are some key things about miniature painting? Might be techniques, or it might be lessons or ways of thinking, and so on, that you know now, but you wish that you'd known when you first started out? I remember that you made a couple of videos about your first miniature, your white and hazard stripe marine. What are some lessons, both technique and kind of intangible, that you wish you'd known when 8-year-old Duncan sat down to paint his first Warhammer miniature?
Well, I mean, it was a very different time in the hobby then. You had photographic guides and things, but they only could tell you so much. And well, the beauty about doing videos about painting stuff is that you can actually see the technique being implemented. Right? It's not like, here's a photo that it's been done and what I did was this. You actually see the whole process of it. And so I simply didn't understand a lot of these things, and being very shy and introverted, I didn't really ask staff about it either in my local games workshop. So I didn't understand about thinning your paint. Like I saw them using a palette, and so I started using a palette, but I didn't know why I was using it. So I wouldn't thin the paint down or anything like that. I just put the paint on the palette, then goop it onto the miniature from there. So I didn't understand that you should do that. That a huge part about it is using that to gain control of your paint correctly. I didn't understand what the different brushes were for, so I assumed a fine detail brush is obviously what you want because the models are fine detailed, right? So I started with just a fine detail brush, and I got to a point of painting a rhino. And my Space Marines at the time were white, and I'd hand undercoat them white. And so I hand undercoated a rhino white with a fine detail brush. So this thing looked so lumpy, but it was mine and I loved it. I eventually repainted it as Ultramarines, and it was like, again, still even lumpier still. I wish I still had it, to be honest. It's a miracle I still got my first model, to be fair. But if you look at a picture of that miniature, you can see how thick the white paint's gooped on it. I was doing that for quite a while until I started to see how people were doing things in the shop, and I started then trying to copy it at home. When I figured out dry brushing, that was a big game changer, because I realised I could use it I could undercoat a model black, and say if I was painting an Ultramarine, I could then dry brush it quite heavily with blue, and it would leave some shading in it, and that was a bit of a jump for me of understanding why you want to do shading. Because early on, I didn't see what's the point of shading or highlighting, because the model's three-dimensional, its light's going to do that anyway. I didn't understand you're exaggerating it, for scale or anything like that. So, yeah, having some of these things explained early on would have been great, but I got there in the end, and I was having fun, so that's what mattered.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm only very slowly learning, 10 years plus doing painting, is tabletop distance and painting distance are a million miles apart. So you can think you're overdoing some shading or some contrast or some highlighting, and then you put it on a table and you can't see anything. It looks like a flat colour, So learning to be a bit bold on that is actually something that you used to say quite a lot on videos. Just like, be careful here, be bold here. So it's interesting. Post Lameo, this is an interesting side shift into actual gaming. Are there any miniature games? Presumably outside of Warhammer, given that you play Warhammer, but are there any miniature games you're excited about playing?
So a game I played the most of since leaving workshop is actually A Song of Ice and Fire from Simon. That's a very... it's got quite a competitive slant on it these days, but it's a very elegant set of rules. It's very well designed, so I do encourage anyone to give it a go. It's clever because it's got enough miniatures on the board to make it feel like a mass battle game. And your traditional maneuvers make sense in that game. You're looking to try and flank the enemy or get behind them, that sort of thing. But it has this... so you do alternate activations, so you're never out of the game for very long. You have a deck of cards that are specific to the different factions that give you layers of their character. And then you have a sideboard which represents the political game being played before and during the battle. And it's like thematic, right? So there's these spaces on it, and you claim the space, and it does things on the battlefield itself. And different factions favour different spaces that, again, narratively makes sense. So the faction I like playing the most is the Lannisters, who, if I give you the impression of, if you play Magic the Gathering, it's like having a blue deck in Magic the Gathering when you're playing Lannisters, because your deck is all about attacking the enemy morale, basically representing that you're bribing them or threatening them. Or if the enemy tries to play a card, you've got the counterplot cards, which cancel what they've just done. And so a lot of the game is a poker face as to whether or not you've got any counterplots in your hand. And you're trying to convince people that you do, whether you do or not, But on the spaces, the coin space and the crown space are the ones that give the Lannisters the most benefit. units. For most part, there are some characters that benefit from other ones, but you can stack this up so you can really lean into the threatening aspect by having a character like Cersei as your political character, and you try and claim the crown all the time, which allows her to like stack up the effects of threatening the enemy to make them run away or to pay them off not to do stuff. So the result of this means that you've got the battle itself, but at the same time you're also thinking about what else you can do. And even when your opponent does something, you've got other options that you can explore. So there's very few games I've played where it feels right up to the very end you've got options and you can do clever tricks. So yeah, if that sounds interesting to anybody, I do really recommend you check it out. It's a lot of fun.
I don't know why I wasn't expecting that, but I wasn't expecting that.
I end up painting quite a lot of armies.
It is a very public game, though.
Yeah, I've not had time to do it for a while, but I painted a Lannister army, a Night's Watch army, the Starks. I did Targaryen, and I was halfway through a Baratheon army actually before other things took my time away. So I did quite a few, playing as the Night's Watch was entertaining because they're really, really tough. But I like the Targaryens because their core box is themed around the Dothraki, so the whole army is cavalry and highly maneuverable, like the most maneuverable army in the game. And that's really challenging, but really exciting too, especially if you pull out all these, clever maneuvering tricks. So yeah, last time I went to a tournament where I didn't get crushed, I played as them and I did all right. Last time I went to a tournament though, I did play as Lannisters and I came dead last. But I got the most sporting award, so.
Of course,
so it wasn't all bad.
Yeah. Surely they gave you that when you walked through the door. Most sports.
It's the only time I've won it, but I think everyone just felt sorry for me.
I'll follow on since we're talking about choices of games, because I wanted to ask you if there's any, because since you left GW. Obviously the meteoric rise that started in 2015 money-wise has just kept going on and on and on. There's been more money to relaunch old games, launch new games, and like the range is just crazy now. It's wild. Like there's so much stuff coming out. Is there anything new or real or like old than new, like the old world or Epic or whatever, that's come out since you left that you kind of wish you'd still been in the castle to play with before, or to be in on?
Well, get a seat, everybody. Let me tell you. So my favourite war game has been Warhammer Fantasy, and it wasn't at first when I first started doing this. Like I was like, why would you want bows and arrows when you could have the Space Marines with bolters? But Fantasy really grew on me, and the Bretonnians became my favourite army, and I love the Bretonnians, and I got a bit of a reputation for it in the studio because they hadn't had their book updated in like 10 years or something like that. But there I was painting my new Bretonnian army, and we had cabinet shelves where we could put some of our own projects in, and so I was putting my army in there, and Peach was doing Undead, and we were playing this map campaign at the time, and people were stopping and looking at the armies and were like, why are you doing those? Like they're not really Warhammer, are they? And I was like, yeah, they are, And this twist of them not being Warhammer really sort of like kicked in when the end times started happening, and it became a bit, what would you say, like the political wind was that you're not really on board unless you're fully in with the new thing and you don't like the old thing, and that was like a whiplash thing that really caught me out, and like I wasn't really happy about that. But I consider myself a professional, so sure, I'll show you how to paint the Stormcast, but behind the scenes I'm crying because I want to paint my Knights of the Realm. So anyway, I was even in the pitch meeting for what was going to be the 8th edition Bretonnian book, and I was hearing the discussion about where the direction they were going to take them and the different ideas for new units and things, and I was there as the fanboy role, basically, to say, like, I think this would be cool, and they'd sort of humour me like, there, that's nice, but it was to just give a bit of an influence as to what the audience might think. So anyway, the end times happen, and I can distinctly remember being in Adepticon, doing a seminar, and people were talking about the end times and stuff. And I said, I bet you the old world's going to come back in some way, probably done by Forge World, in about 10 years. As it turns out, it took 5. So it came, or at least until they announced it. And when that came along, then when they announced Bretonnians were going to be like the flagship faction along with Tomb Kings, I was like, what is this world? I can remember being told you shouldn't be so enthusiastic about Bretonnians because they're not really on message anymore, when Well, and a few years later, it's like Wargamer Community is showing Bretonians everywhere with brand new artwork and all this stuff. And like, look at this amazing new Bretonian miniature. Don't you want it? And it's such a bizarre thing. So I would have loved being behind the scenes to see that again. And I'd love to talk to some of the people developing it to understand why their direction for the Bretonians is a total opposite direction from where the Citadel Studio was going to take it. I'd love to know the reason why. So.
Well, if you get that interview, I'll pay for it to put on put it on Wargamer.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating. Yeah, because
Duncan Rhodes asked Games Workshop why they did Bretonia wrong.
Well, not wrong. It's just different. Right? And I want to know why. Because if you look at the Bretonians in the Total War game, right, they have like a cavalry unit of Hippogriff Knights, whereas in the old world they have Knights of the Realm on foot. And I know that the Bretonian culture is like, no one fights on foot unless you're a massive loser. So why did they do that? Why the change? So there you go. I could rant about that for ages. I know if Roger's listening to this right now, he's going to be rolling his eyes out his sockets.
Now we've got a good question about teeth and coats. Before I ask it, let's go back over teeth and coats. You collaborated with those colleagues and I think another company as well to formulate a whole bunch of new paints a few years back.
Transatlantic
new range, a new kind of wave of those quite recently. Tell us about the idea behind that. Like, why was that the next stage of what you did? And
I suppose to give that context, I should say basically how about it happened. So Roger and I, at that time, the academy was really small. It was basically just us two, and then we had Roger's wife joined us to basically take our admin off our hands because it was too much at the time. And we had ideas of it'd be really cool to make a product, like maybe we could make a paintbrush or something like that. Wouldn't that be awesome? And then out of the blue, we had an email from this guy called Bob Watts. Now, Bob is an industry veteran who's been working in various companies for like decades, right? So whilst you might not know his name, you certainly will have encountered something that he's been responsible for doing. So like running Games Workshop North America, for example. And at the time, he was looking to set up his own company because whilst he's one of these people that's always run companies, like I don't know how you get into that in the first place, but he wanted to do his own company for the first time. And he approached us wanting to license our brand to make a range of hobby paints. And we said, sure, that sounds great, because we already kind of knew him from our interactions with some of the other stuff we've been doing beforehand. But he had a pitch of a colour wheel with some paints on it, and we were like, that's really cool, but if we're going to put our name on something, it has to match the quality standards that we would expect of it, because quite literally it's our survival, right? If you get what I mean. If we put out something rubbish, morally, we're not going to be okay with that, but also it's a reputation destroyer, right? So we wanted to make everything as good as possible, especially as, I suppose, in a way of carrying the trust of people who have supported us all that time. So we counted saying we'd like to choose the colours because we're kind of a gateway into the hobby. We'd like it to be structured to help people learn with a triad system, so they understand how the colours fit together to get a base of things before they then move off and do whatever they want with them. And we want to approve everything. How does that sound? And Bob just was like, yes, please. Absolutely, that sounds amazing. And they've been a pleasure to work with because they essentially have the attitude of, what's your perfect paint? And it means that we can go down to an individual paint in the factory, adjusting the chemicals in real time with the chemists until the thing does what we want it to do. So quite beyond the colour, they'll match the colour, but the behaviour of the paint is something that's much more complicated. And they'll sit there and I'll say, like, I want this to be a little bit more opaque. What can you do? And they'll do stuff, but it might change another property. So then they'll do other stuff to alter that. So it becomes a very detailed process. But it's been amazing because TAG don't go, can you compromise on that? Because we want to make, like, we want to cut the price of that a little bit. We want to make a bit more profit there. They don't do any of that sort of thing. They're just purely what's the best product that you would want, and that's where the paints came about. So whilst we were sort of like, oh, it'd be great if we could do a brush, suddenly we had the opportunity of having a range of 30 paints. And so Bob then says, is that enough? Are you happy with 30? And we were like, well, we're doing this triad thing, so it means that we ended up effectively having less colours, because you're like 3 reds, 3 greens, so you can't have olive green, so you need to have the emerald green because that's a bit more commonly used. So we're like, well, could we up it to 48? And he's like, sure. Are you sure that's enough? Well, what if it was 60? He was like, okay. Do you want any more? We'll leave that to wave 2. And so it just grew, and then the Kickstart happened, and it just exploded. And through that phase, I saw some of the most, in a very personal way, some of the most humbling stuff I've ever seen. In talking about the effect we've had on the hobby for people, because we saw people saying they were back in the Kickstarter purely because they wanted to see us succeed, because we'd helped them learn hobby techniques, and they were enjoying it more because of stuff that we'd done, which I thought was just incredible. So it beyond my wildest dreams, absolutely. I had no idea that was going to happen when we were leaving workshop. When we were leaving workshop, I was worried that we were going to be able to pay ourselves, and here we are, all of a sudden we've got this range all around the world. So for any of you who've bought any of the paints, and I hope you like them, thank you so much for supporting it.
It doesn't surprise me that those people came to your Kickstarter based on the experiences that they had, but it is nonetheless a lovely thing to hear that it surprised you and made you sort of humbled about that. So the question that I was setting up to about Two Thin Coats from Batsy, who says, you've got a sizable paint range now, handful of washes. What's next? What are the future visions? E.g., coming back to those enamels, e.g. enamels, effect paints or speed paints like Contrast. What's bubbling in the R&D department at Two Thin Coats?
Well, unsurprisingly, I can't tell you. We do have numerous things on the back burner, like various projects, some really exciting ones, some that I think, sorry, the sun's getting right in my eye now. Just so you know, everybody, this is the very first time I've done one of these things at this desk, so forgive the lighting being a little bit weird. I'm not used to it yet. Yeah, we are working on a number of things. We'll announce them when things are ready. I think some of the stuff is really going to surprise people, what we're doing. But through all of it, we're putting the most effort in that we can to make everything as high quality as we can. What I will say when it comes to enamels is that's a whole different kettle of fish to acrylics. There are so many legal things to work through because of the nature of the chemical formulas of them. So there's a big question mark on that. But yeah, keep an eye out. We'll certainly announce things and you'll definitely see stuff.
Supreme. Folks, keep the questions coming in. I wanted to, while you're thinking about it, I wanted to ask about the Painting Academy. So that's the day job most of the time. You're making some public videos, but also some videos for the Academy and producing kind of products, courses, to teach people certain techniques, or in some cases teach people how to paint from the start. I wanted to ask, but basically, how's that gone? Like, it's selling teaching online is obviously a big thing in general. Like there are lots of businesses that do that in different sectors and so on. But painting is an area where there's reams of free tutelage available. The people, in some cases, people who grew up to an extent with your free YouTube tutorials from Games Workshop back in the day. And these days, of course, you paved the way, but there's billions of people doing it now on YouTube, and many of them very, very high quality, doing all sorts of different methods and so on. What made you want to go in with the Academy as an idea, as a paid course thing, and how's it gone? How's it grown?
So there's a few things to unpack for that. So before we actually launched the Academy, so Roger and I, we had a plan, and we came to a membership-based website as a good source, because what we wanted to do is create an archive essentially of painting help, of guidance for people of all levels of the hobby. And we want to be able to organise it in a way where everything's neat and nicely placed together and can have support things related to it. So we have a gallery for all the miniatures we paint, for example, so you can see them in detail from different angles. The list of the paints used, all that sort of thing. And whilst we could have set up on Patreon, we knew that that would end up more or less like a blog, and we wanted it to be easier to navigate than that. So we thought the website was a bit more in line with what we wanted. We also wanted it to be seen as a business, like a company doing this thing, from which other things can then sprout. We didn't want it to be Duncan as an influencer or anything like that. That's not really the sort of thing we're interested in. And I think having the sites helps show that. I think we consider that's our home, not YouTube. YouTube's great for we put videos on there to engage people and stuff, to keep in the conversation. But we view our home as our website, where all of our really cool stuff is, all our main stuff is. So that's the reason why we went for that. Now, the reason why I think it has gone very well. I mean, when we launched, we had no idea how it would do. We knew what rough membership number we needed to survive, and we had some savings to pay our own wages for a while, so we had a certain amount of time to get to that. And it went very, very well straight away. And in fact, our website crashed as soon as we launched it because of the amount of people that came to have a look. And that was scary because we had to learn how to fix it. Roger had basically taught himself how to develop a website. And so we were there sat back to back trying to work out how to reconnect all these things and upgrade our service and all this stuff. So that was stressful. But it's definitely grown, and it's provided a great stable basis where we can add things like a course on there where we can do a whole detailed thing of it, rather than it being like a bunch of videos that are all separated out on a platform like YouTube. So yeah, I think the reason why people come to it for our content though is because we approach our painting videos in a very consistent, very clear way that's all based around just showing you what to do. We don't do any showing off or anything like that, and we have a consistent formula that a lot of people are familiar with, so they can understand what we're doing and new things very easily. So in our video, for example, we don't skip any bits. We show literally the entire process from start to finish. And to give you an example of that taken to quite an extreme, we recently did the Sky Lantern for Cathay, and we're very efficient at filming these videos now because we've been doing it for so long. It took us 5 days of filming to film that whole video, and the editing was right behind where the filming was. So the editing was finished on the 6th day of that, and then we were able to upload it after that. Now, that's the most intense shooting schedule we've had. Typically, we'll do a big model in 3 days and a single model in 1. But it means we can get rapid content on there, all of it the same standard. And in that Sky Lantern video, we show you how to paint everything all the way through. We pick a particular build for it, but we go through the whole lot. We show the magistrate, and we show how to paint all the details, including the unique gem that's on his hat. We go through all the stages for that, and we do it in an order where it's designed to allow easy access to all of this stuff. So quite beyond the colours we're using, with the lantern, we start with the gondola because we can explain this thing's pretty straightforward to paint, but it's also a big part of it. So if you do this first, you've got a psychological kick to carry on doing it because you painted a big chunk of it. The next thing is the lantern, which is actually even faster than doing the gondola is. Even though it's big, intimidating surfaces, you do this stuff like you apply your wash, you put it upside down so the paint runs down, so when you turn it back, it looks like shading underneath all the ridges. And then you dry brush it to clean it all up, and there you go, that goes together. You basically now painted your lantern. All you got to do is the crew. So we'll move on to that now. And the crew take longer, but you've already got the big bit done, you see, so you've got that psychological wind to drive you forward. So we have lots of stuff like that scattered in amongst all our content, and I think people like that it's very down-to-earth and approachable. And we stick to that even with the more high-end videos that we do, where we do more advanced techniques. We still go through all the basics of all the core things so that anyone can access it. So I think that's why people like it. At least that's what they say. So yeah, there you go.
I like the point towards psychological wins as part of how to approach your hobby, because that strikes me as one of the more like universal things that people experience, and also one of the things that are like you get least good advice about is how to organize your mind to go towards a certain hobby project and keep enjoying it and get to the end without wanting to claw your eyes out. And it reminds me of what you said earlier about your hobby being essentially army painting and approaching a game that you want to play and an army that you have a concept for and doing that as a project. Are there any other really good tips that you keep in mind when? Okay, well, I'll ask you in a minute about like games you're looking forward to playing for the first time soon. But say you've got a new game, you've got a new army you want to get play ready to 1,000 points or so equivalent. What tips would you say people should keep in mind for getting from start to finish without going mad?
So the first thing would be when you're getting into doing the army. The internet can be a real boon, but also a real curse with this sort of thing. So what I'll typically do when I'm starting a project is get some inspiration, and I'll just collect images of things that people have done, just things that I like that I can start to pull together and take inspiration from for my own things. But if you're not careful, you can start comparing yourself to that stuff, and then you never find yourself happy with it. And that's especially true when you have things like Instagram and how the algorithms work. You get you'll have women can compare themselves to photographs of women that have put them on Instagram and they spent days setting up for a photo for the perfect photo. And that can be like quite a toxic thing to be comparing yourself to. The same thing can happen with miniatures, where people have this thing on there that looks absolutely incredible, but it's taken hours to get to that point. And then you can look at your miniature and go, why doesn't mine look like that? And it could be really off-putting. So you've got to have that discipline of understanding, like that's something else. Don't compare yourself to that. Only compare yourself, if you're looking to improve, to what you were doing yesterday, and just try and nudge yourself a little bit further and stick to your own hobby, basically, what makes you happy. The same is true when it comes to talking about things like meta and stuff like that. I personally wouldn't even worry about it. Just collect the army you like with the models you like, because painting a miniature army is a very personal experience. Put a lot of hours into it. You want to be doing the stuff that you think's cool. There's no point punishing yourself in painting the unit that might be like destroying everything, but you hate. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, you're not going to enjoy it. Your painting should be a nice relaxing experience that you just get to do in the evening, when you're like winding down or something. So yeah, I'd stick to that. When it comes to actually doing the units, I tend to start out with a core unit of an army, then I'll paint a character as a bit of a reward for having done a whole bunch of dudes, and I've got like, that's a cool figure that I really like, and then from that point on I'll do like an elite unit, and then a vehicle as a reward after that, and I'll stack up my army that way, and I'll do it in blocks of aiming for about 500 points, then I'll up that to 750, then 1,000, and kind of go in that way. And in fact, that's what I'm more or less doing at the moment. So I'm a real hobby butterfly, right? I jump things all over the time. My excuse for doing this is because I do the painting for a living, and I don't want to burn myself out. So if I decide I want to go and paint something, I'll go and paint that thing, even if I do have another project. So I've got two main projects on the go. Main one is the Cathay Army, which I just started doing unexpectedly because I had so much fun painting a test model for a video. And I've ended up just carrying on, and so I've been painting loads of Jade Warriors. And I've also been doing some old Chaos Space Marines, which I've got down here. I don't know how well this will come through, but I wasn't happy with how some things were looking on them, so I just went back and started redoing. So here's an old second edition, horribly lit Chaos Marine I've been doing. But with these, I'm just doing a squad, and then I'll reward myself with a character. Then after that, I'll do some Chaos Cultists as a little squad, and then I'll do something like a Dreadnought, so I'll follow that pace all the way through. But how good these are going to be, I have no idea. But I am looking forward to having a go with second edition 40k with them. That's going to be so much fun.
That's an interesting cut, because the last video AMA we did was with the guys from Mini Wargaming, the YouTube channel, who have explicitly recently changed their tack. Not to not do any 10th edition 40k competitive whatever. They're still going to do some bits of that, but like they just started playing old editions of 40k for the giggles.
Fun. That's some great old editions, man.
To use templates and funny and scatter dice and the RPG-ishness and stuff. I've never played one of the editions that had a game master. I'd love to try that.
Yeah, I really want to play second. I never understood it when I was a kid, but that is what was the edition of 40k when I got into it. So I've got a lot of nostalgia for it. I love the colours and the style of it. So actually playing is going to be a blast. And I do have a third edition rulebook as well, so I can move my army into third edition and play that again. I think that'd be fun. But my angle's all I'm very whimsical in my army selections, and I like playing in a more narrative way. And my favourite way to play games is with a map campaign. So I've got map campaign. I need to finish the map actually, because the reason I'm not is because the guys doing this I haven't got together for a while. But I was going to play an Ancients campaign with Romans and Carthaginians and stuff, fighting over Sicily. So I got the old Mighty Empire hex tiles. I've been putting them together to make a 3-dimensional model of Sicily and marking where the towns are and everything, and all the landscapes and things. So we're going to fight a campaign over that. I've also got a map of the same sort of thing that was a made-up one for Warhammer Fantasy called Skaldonia. And all the guys I used to play that with, they've all been doing new stuff for the old world. So I'm like, right, well, I've just spontaneously started playing some Cathay stuff. None of them know I've been doing, I mean, they might be listening to this, I don't know, but none of them know I've been doing any Cathay things because I've not shown them yet. So my plan is to get them all together, bring out the old map. And do you remember the old Border Patrol stuff? Do you remember that? The 500-point games things?
Ooh.
Remember that? It was like a format where you could play the game at 500 points and it gave you a few restrictions and things.
Yeah.
I was going to combine that in a Games Master style perspective of having everyone doing patrols to establish the borders of their territories. And I was going to start adding in some like leveling up experience things, like Mordheim style stuff, and adding magic items and things to improve the characters. And then we could start a big campaign using those characters to lead it. But I was just going to turn up with a Cathayan army like that and just see what people do. Yeah. So that's how I like to play. That's what really, really excites me in wargaming. The more competitive stuff I find quite cold in comparison to doing that. So my taste is definitely all about just having a bit of silly fun over the weekend.
I think there's lots of things I'd like to ask you about that, but we are now getting to the last 5 minutes, so I think it's going to be quick fire time. There's a few questions in the chat that I haven't brought up.
I'll try and be quick. I do tend to ramble, I'm afraid.
You and me both, brother. So another one from Batsy. It's actually quite a good question, this. You talked about how working at GW sometimes felt limiting because you only using Citadel paints, full stop, nothing else, nothing outside of the GW stable. How does this translate to the work you're doing now with tutorials, now that you have your own paint company? How does it affect the decisions you make?
So I'll quickly answer the thing about workshop. I'm surprised whenever someone will take on the presenting job or a job at workshop that you are limited to using the Games Workshop products. I'm surprised people don't see that as an obvious thing. Being the face of doing the painting, especially with the fact I was the only person doing it for a number of years, obviously I had to only use Games Workshop products. But then, to be honest, that's all I used in my own hobby anyway. So it's not like none of it was me cheating out, pretending there's something I would rather use instead. That was literally the things I'd use at home. Now, having left Workshop, it is certainly quite an experience being free to use whatever you want, but I actually had to go and learn different products and things because I'd been so cloistered in the Games Workshop mold. Now, with our own brand of paints, it was a funny thing starting that because we started to introduce them into videos as they were becoming more available, and we always intended to use them to a degree, but to keep on using other companies' products too, to make it very clear that we intend you can follow the guides with any paint brand that you want. But then we started seeing people questioning why we weren't only using our paints. Does it mean they're not very good? If he's not using them, then why should I use them? And we were like, okay, we kind of have to. So we do, and I mean, I'm totally confident in the quality of them, so I'm absolutely happy using them. I mean, they are literally, every one of them is a formula based upon what I want them to be, so I'm totally happy with them. But we do make sure our guides all have, so there's a translation document on our website where you can use any of the other major brands, and we give color equivalents, and whilst there is variance in the colors slightly, you'll get the same kind of result, right? So the guide, the process of what order we're doing stuff in is the main thing, right? So basically, we don't want to lock anyone out of following our stuff if they want to use another brand. You're totally welcome to. I won't complain if you do. So, yeah. It's a fine line. It's quite a tricky thing to navigate. But you see what I mean? If we don't use it, people question why we're not using it. So we sort of have to. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it the way you started that answer, the way you ended it, both touch on an interesting tension in online tabletop games media, which is this tension between wanting to be on the one side, everyone wants to be very community oriented and bring in as many different things as possible and show that you can do things lots of different ways and you can use any products you want. And on the other side, anybody who's doing this as job has its job. When you're making your videos, you have to consider those kinds of impacts on the audience, which you didn't know that was.
We have to make a living. Yeah, well, we got to make a living with it.
They must be rubbish. Like,
yeah, we've got wages we have to pay. We have to make sure everyone's happy. But we want to do that honorably and honestly. So I mean, like the paint, I've got the paints here. My wife and I use them. So yeah. So the fundamental thing is that in any of our content, none of it is a lie. And we, if you look at the point of survival, my name's on the things, right? So if they weren't very good, I'd be getting it in the neck. So and Tag don't push back on the quality or anything like that. They're like, if you're happy with that paint, that's what it's going to be. That's what all of it is. So yeah,
absolutely.
Sorry, I took quite a long time answering that question.
No, I took too long on the follow up. Bark Seifu says, do you have any upcoming projects you're looking forward to? I guess.
Oh yeah.
Personal or work.
Yes to both. So as I mentioned, I can't wait to have a go with my Cathay army for the first time without my mates knowing I've got it. And I can't wait to have a go at playing 2nd edition 40k with these Chaos Marines. That's going to be a blast. I'm tempted. There's a YouTuber, I think it's called Minisodes, and his channel's all about 2nd edition 40k, and he's really funny. And I've chatted to him a few times, and I'm interested to see if he might be willing to have a game with me. I think that'd be really fun. So yeah, as for other stuff, there's some stuff that I think are really going to surprise people, and I can't wait to see how that goes. But I can't say because it'd spoil things.
Oh, there's another question literally just come in specifically just now asking about that. After Dark Hearts, what's planned for TTC? Wave 4 to fill in colours? Leaning more towards theme sets, effect paints, basing materials?
Watch this space. We got things.
Duncan's lips are sealed. We're just about out of time, so everyone who's here, if you've got a question, ask it right now so that I can ask it very quickly before we have to say goodbye to Duncan.
Fast.
Here we go. Oh, last caller. All right, Batsy, I'll ask about battle reports. Duncan, are you going to make battle reports?
They would take away from our regular painting content, which is what people pay us for. So if we were to do them, it has to be done in a way without losing that. So we got some things. We might do like a podcast or a role play game or something like that. But for battle reports, we've got ideas, but like I say, it can't take away from the painting content. So.
Absolutely. To be fair, Batsy, it's a good question. Battle reports are often seen as like, the gold standard. If you're making anything about wargaming, you're working up to getting battle reports. But if you know anything about them, they're incredibly cost intensive to make, time intensive to make. And unless that's the one thing you do, it's very, very hard to get anywhere doing them. So obviously Duncan's got to focus on the main thing that they do, and everything has to support that. Utrecht says, what's the best historical period for wargaming?
Oh, that's a big question. Depends what stuff you think's cool. I think if you're looking for a historical period that's going to be like Warhammer, where you got lots of different factions to choose. Napoleonics is one of them, although bear in mind the armies are all generally very similar, but there's like lots of different factions you can look into. A really, really good one is Ancients, set in the Rise of Rome period. So this is what Rome Total War uses, because you got lots of nations that are all big enough that they could have empires. They can all feasibly fight each other, and they've all got different flavors. So like Rome is different to Carthage. Then you've got the successor states who, whilst they all base around pike phalanxes, they've all got different interesting things around them, like elephants or scythe chariots or things. Then you've got all the Celtic nations, and then there's like the Spanish, and so there's loads and loads that can all combine together. And if you take a look at Victrix, so this is a miniature manufacturing company, they've got loads of hard plastic kits of all these different things that can actually be combined together to convert other units from these times. So yeah, I'd recommend that if you're looking for like a good easy entryway into Ancient.
Superb. Have you played, by the way, the Rome Total War, the board game? This is something
I nearly backed it, but I was a bit worried about the money at the time.
And you were right to be, because it's been through a very, very strange and bumpy development ride since then, and it's quite hard to get hold of. But for everyone who's reading, check out the Rome Total War board game review on wargamer.com. It's a very good game. With a card-based war game inside it for some reason. It's a very crazy game.
You should play an actual war game instead.
Yeah, it's all in there. Have we missed one? What is your favourite tea?
Clipper.
clipper.
I bet no one expected that, right?
Literally,
yes.
I'm floored.
My wife started buying them, and then we tried Yorkshire, and it didn't taste as nice to us. Especially
Wow.
Yorkshire Gold, which is too bitter. And then we tried Tetley, which didn't have enough flavour in it. So, yeah, we're sticking with Clipper now.
Well, up on wargamer.com tomorrow, Duncan Rhodes' top 10 brands of tea revealed.
Yeah, a cup of Clipper combined with a nice custard cream.
Can you paint with tea? I mean, you can paint with tea.
You can,
Ish.
but would you want to? You could drink it instead.
That's going to result in you drinking the paint water, surely. That's a meme we haven't got time to joke about at this stage. Okay, all right. Oh, tea paint's coming soon. I think we're going to draw this to a close, folks. Duncan, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute delight having you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's really nice to have the opportunity to do stuff like this. And thank you, everybody, for supporting us and following us on this crazy journey. For our whole team, you allow us to exist. So, thank you very much.